So, a little background on Ian.
Oh.
Ian O. Williamson was appointed Dean of the UCI Paul Merage School of Business on January 1, 21. Prior to joining the Merage School, he served as Pro-Vice Chancellor and Dean of Commerce at the Wellington School of Business and Government at Victoria University in Wellington, New Zealand. Ian received his PhD from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
So close.
Oh, so close. So close. 20 good minutes of basketball.
Let's take a moment.
Yeah.
And a bachelor's degree in business from Miami University. He has served as a faculty member at Melbourne Business School, Rutgers Business School, the Zurich Institute of Business Education, and the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland, and Institute Technology Bandung in Indonesia. Ian is a globally recognized expert in the area of human resource management. His research examines the impact of talent pipelines on organizational and community outcomes. Ian has assisted executives in over 20 countries across 6 continents to enhance firm, operational, and financial outcomes, improve talent and retention, enhance firm innovation, and understand the impact of social issues on firm outcomes. I think of Ian as a personal friend and a friend Also, I wanted to honor Ian's family who are in attendance here today, and I'm fortunate to have met you all upstairs. Willard Williamson, Ian's father.
Woo! All right.
Olivia Williamson, his mother. She's pretty awesome. Brandy Williamson, Ian's wife, who I will tell you is definitely a much better driver, parker, and the boss of the family. Sterling Williamson, who's off the charts. And I don't believe I have met or seen Patricia Sperlin. Your aunt, is she here?
Don't seem to see. That's all right.
Or your uncle Rami Sperlin? And Jerome Sperlin, your nephew.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm certain that Ian, who is your husband, your son, your father, your nephew, your uncle, will make you extremely proud today.
No pressure.
No, not at all. Yeah.
That's a high standard to live up to.
I know. I got to go home, these people.
Then you're saying all the right stuff. All right, so it's time to get down to business and begin the conversation. So Ian, who are you? How did you become you? Describe your personal journey from the starting point in Chicago to the ending point, whatever that means, of the opportunities you've had in your early years, what your career aspirations did you have, etc. I want this place to really hear who's Ian.
Got it. So let me, just say I am very honored, and it's really a privilege to be here. So thank you very much, personally, as well as Genesis Bank, for the opportunity. Am I coming in okay? Yeah. I'll refrain from using the professor voice then. And I don't take this for granted. And I was just sitting here looking at this, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm a proud south side kid. And this would have been a scene that I would have saw on television growing up. I mean, this is quintessential California. Like, the idea that we're sitting outside and complaining about it's hot and it's early April, while in Chicago, they're worried about the next snow. And, palm trees. And so there is moments I actually do pinch myself, because there's literally nothing about this environment that was similar to the first home I knew, which was 4722 South Indiana on the south side of Chicago. If you drove down that street today, you would quickly realize you're definitely not here. And and so what happens between me going to that house when I was born and me getting here is a lot of different things. I should acknowledge the constant throughout each of those phases was certainly my family. And it really is, I was blessed. I had a phenomenal family, and it was just coincidence that my parents happened to be visiting from Chicago, that they had an opportunity to come here. And so I'm really proud that I get a chance to acknowledge them in public. I certainly try to do my best to acknowledge them privately as well. And obviously my wife and my son and my twin daughters, who are actually at university in Washington, D.C. right now. So I must admit, when I was in high school, I didn't really have a plan. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was an athlete. I was good enough to be, able to do that. but I didn't really exactly know what that meant. College was something my parents had instilled in me, is you're going to college. What that was, I didn't really know, other than by the time I got to be a senior, I realized that meant I wasn't going to be in their house, and that was a good thing. Like, I wanted to go someplace and see the world. And I went to college with this goal of being in business. What that was, I didn't really know. And I'll tell you, the only reason I majored in business, the Rotary Club happened to come to my economics class, and they said they would take students down, each individual, the member, would take a student from my class, and we get a chance to spend a day with them. And it was a gentleman who worked for a bank who took me downtown to Chicago in a building much taller than this one, and he took me to his office, and if I remember correctly, he had something to do with currency exchange, and I didn't really quite understand what that was, but I did appreciate that he had a really nice office, and he was in downtown Chicago, and I looked around and I was thinking, this is better. And, how did you get here? Something, 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 majored in business. I got enough. And so I got to college not really understanding what that was, but I knew it was a chance. It was a step. And I'm the oldest of 6 boys, and so I knew it was very important. This was a very important decision for my family, that I had this opportunity to do that. So I didn't take that. There was no plan B. I knew this was my shot to kind of do something that was going to be life-changing for me, and as it turns out, life-changing for my family. Along the way, though, everything changed. And, I was told when I was in college, you learn a lot of important things. One of the lessons that I learned was the sign of a true education is a change in behavior. So if you go to school and you're behaving one way, and you come out of school and you're behaving the same way, by definition, you didn't get educated. And I learned about things I never knew about. And one of those was the academy, about being an academic. I actually didn't know, to be honest, that a professor was a full-time job. I thought that was something you did on the side. I didn't know that was a profession or a career. It just was not something I'd been exposed to. And I had an academic, a scholar, a friend now, Dr. Wesley King, who took me aside and talked to me about these things. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And so several programs that were in place to support people to encourage academic careers. And I knew at that point that was something I wanted to do. However, I graduated with a degree in business, and someone mentioned to me, well, if you want to one day become a business professor, you might actually want to become a business person and actually do that. And I thought that was good advice. My father reminded me that I actually needed to make some money. That was good advice as well. And so I got a job, and it was a great job. I worked for a company, a multinational retailer.
How'd you get the job?
So I worked for Aldi. Many of you may have heard of it. It's a German company, one of the most successful private companies on the planet. And they happened to be recruiting at my university. Now Aldi is known for providing, low-cost food. And I'm a family of, 6 boys. And you could imagine that food was a precious commodity in my house. We would race to take the groceries out of the car to put them up because somehow some of the groceries did not actually make it to the refrigerator or the cabinet. And so this was the place that fed my family. Literally, we would not have been able to eat had we not had Aldi down the street. So I went to the career fair, and there was a gentleman there who was recruiting. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't even realize they were in Ohio. I went to school in Ohio, grew up in Chicago. And we got to talking, and he said, oh, have you ever heard of Aldi? And I should say, Miami University of Ohio is a public school, but it's known for being a pretty elite public school, typically higher income, and that wasn't my situation. And so he was shocked that I actually knew him, but then I said, oh, no, we shop there every week. And he was like, what are you talking about? And turns out the store my mother shopped at was the store he was responsible for when he started in the company. And I started rattling off everything in that store, like every price of everything. And he was like, how do you know this? And so I was a junior. And I said, so I'm looking for an internship. Do you have one? He says, oh, sorry, we don't have internships. I'm like, oh, that was a waste of my time. So I gave him my resume. And a year later, he called me up out of the blue. And he says, I remember meeting you at this career fair where I figured you'd be a senior. You're looking for a job. And I said, I certainly am. And long story short, I ended up getting a job there. And I ended up running multiple units for them all across Indiana. And, I was really appreciative of the chance he gave me the break to kind of engage in that. And it was very fulfilling because I was working for a company that had literally fed my family and was providing that for other individuals as well. But I knew I wanted to be an academic. And after a while of doing that, I decided to go back to school and went to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And it was a phenomenal experience. My wife and I, we were married literally the week before I started school. So I give her a lot of kudos because I quit my job. And then I asked her.
still saying yes.
Still saying yes. Still saying yes.
Talking about being here for the long game. And it was fantastic. And I began my career as an academic, so I worked at the University of Maryland. And that would have been an unbelievable story for me if it had just ended there. And then I had some interesting experiences. I got an opportunity, was invited to go speak and teach in Poland. And when this opportunity presented itself, it was 2005. I did not have a passport. I had no reason for a passport. I couldn't comprehend why you needed one of those things. And this gentleman invited me to come speak. In a moment of weakness, I said, okay, sure. Next thing I know, I was getting a passport, flew to Warsaw. I got on a bus in Warsaw to take a 6-hour ride to Łódź. Got off there and ended up spending several weeks there teaching executives, Polish executives who were privatizing previously government-held firms. And it was one of the most life-changing experiences ever, for me and for them. I had never seen anybody like that, and they had never seen anybody like me. And we found a way to make it work. And it dawned on me that there was a conversation happening globally that I did not understand. And again, you don't get into the education business unless you're truly committed to educating, not just others, yourself. And so this prompted a conversation with our family, and we decided to, well, why don't we see what that conversation is like? So I started applying to business schools all around the world. No rhyme or reason. I really didn't understand. I knew what I didn't know.
What drove you to that? You're a kid from Chicago. You've got a perspective of the world that until then was like this big.
Yeah.
And the story about the passport, you had no aspiration of seeing any of the world, and all of a sudden you're pulled into it.
I just, like I said, I think it dawned on me that there were things happening, and there was a certain sense of professional pride and curiosity in the sense that I wanted to challenge myself. I was doing well in my career, and I wanted to challenge myself to say, can I do work that is relevant across a wide variety of communities? To me, if you're trying to have a leadership role, a leader of one is, you're a leader of all. And can you do work that is meaningful? And for me to do that, I realized I needed to kind of put myself in those situations to understand what were the issues that people were thinking about. And I also took inspiration from the students I was teaching. I had about 30% of the students I was teaching from overseas. They were learning oftentimes in a language that wasn't their first language. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, this is a personal challenge as well as a professional opportunity. So the opportunity came to Melbourne, Australia. I didn't know anyone there. We flew there. My wife came with me on the interview. If I was to be candid, I told her, we're going to go for this interview, enjoy yourself, but we're never coming back. And because it was just too far away. And my wife was extraordinarily supportive and saying, this is a good idea, and we should make it happen. And so that helps, right? Because we had twin daughters who were 3 at the time. And so that was a big jump. And my mother said something to me. I went to her after we were thinking about this, and I said, would you be mad at me if I took your grandbabies to the other side of the planet? And she said, Ian, don't let the fact that I couldn't do it mean you can't do it.
So when I hear you say that, I think of things like, at this stage in my life, my kids are 3. When else am I going to get to do this? Because eventually I might be doing that. Were you thinking more near-term, short-term, immediate? Or did you have an idea of where you're trying to go?
I'm someone who, what do they say? It's all in, right? And so we saw it. And I said, I'm never going to be able to look at this the same way again. So we need to do this. And if we're wrong, what a great story, right? And if we're right, what a great story. And so it was a challenge. Listen, I don't want to say that there wasn't a little bit of nervousness. I'm sure we sat in the middle of the night going, what are we actually doing? But, it seemed like it would be a great opportunity. And we were fortunate. We had people there that worked with us and supported us. I ended up doing quite a lot of relations for that business school. That meant I led, developed, and executed our international strategy, which is pretty much working across the ASEAN region. So extensive work in Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, China, India. Really learning and becoming embedded in what was and continues to be one of the most exciting and dynamic set of economies on the planet. If you look at the GDP growth of the world, most of that is coming from changes that is happening in our region. So to see that most personal was a tremendous blessing, and also to learn the cultures was a great blessing.
So specifically about Malaysia, Indonesia, other high growth, rapidly developing economies. Go deep into that. What did you really do? What did it look like during that whole span of time that experience?
So the opportunity here was you had economies that were emerging. To give you a sense, Indonesia at that time, the GDP growth was close to 8% annually. This is a country of 240 million people. This is the fourth largest country on the planet. So you can't even comprehend. I mean, if Orange County grew at 8%, we would literally, our hair would go on fire. Imagine 240 million people flying that type of growth. And you had businesses that were coming and probably there was a need for education on how to do this. And so the opportunity that I recognized was here you have these communities that are really coming into their own. They need the skill set to be able to develop organizations that provide the services, do it in a way that is sustainable, and do it in a way that allows them to become the foundations for the future growth of these communities so that it doesn't happen and it burns out. And so that was the pitch I made to my business school. We had never done any work in those regions before. I imagine many of you have been in that situation. You had to go in front of a board of individuals and make a pitch. I didn't exactly know how that was going to go until I walked out and they said yes. And I was like, let me get out of here as fast as possible before something happens. And but that was the opportunity. And we did programs, training everything from ISO, the program I developed. We trained all the senior leaders of every university in Malaysia so they can learn how to develop their university systems. Government entities, family businesses, state-owned enterprises, companies like Petronas, the largest company in Malaysia, one of the largest petrochemical companies on the planet, working with training all their future CFOs, all their finance officers. So it was tremendously impactful work because you had an opportunity where people truly appreciate the need for the skill. And we had to think creatively around how do we develop that and deliver it in a manner that has that type of impact.
Who's the we? Who's the?
So me setting up the relationships and then working with our academic partners and other partners in our community to provide the service. And really understanding how to do that in a manner that was culturally appropriate. So Malaysia, Indonesia, Muslim countries, Australia, obviously now, and really beginning to understand what does that mean? How does that shape the way they think about commercial activity? What does that mean about things like employment, engagement, and retention? So it was a learning opportunity, but also we had a lot to deliver to those communities as well.
I have a question for you, Ian. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So you talked about your time with Aldi in the Chicago area, going to Poland and having those experiences there, then Indonesia, and now back. How would you compare the experiences and the people and just the different styles of work where you were over there versus here, as far as comparing and contrasting?
So I joke, I left America, I went to these places, I lived in Australia, I lived in Indonesia, I lived in New Zealand, and then I came back to America, and there was a how's it feel to be home? I'm like, well, I'm originally from Chicago. Like, I kind of moved to another foreign country called Southern California. It's really different. It's not exactly the same.
Palm trees and movie stars.
Yeah, and so
as a New Yorker, I say that every day.
Yeah, and so I kind of framed it as the next adventure for our family, but also sort of the next learning opportunity for me professionally. You talked about some of the demographics earlier. A very different composition of people, a very different set of businesses, a very different perspective. And so I kind of approached this the same way I approached those other things and saying, what is it that is important? And I'll tell you, one of the lessons I've learned throughout these experiences is that it really reminded me, economic activity, commercial activity, we talk a lot about the nuts and bolts of it in business schools, but at the end of the day, it is an expression of culture. In fact, if you go one step further, the reason why we engage in economic activity is to reinforce, express, strengthen, and extend culture. And we oftentimes lose that. We oftentimes talk about economic activity, commercial activity in a vacuum. But the things that we value, that we put a price on, that we work hard for, all that comes from the things we believe to be right, wrong, true. And if you understand that about a community, that's when you begin to understand what does it actually mean to develop a sustainable business. Because the heart of it is to sustain the culture. And the economic activity is one of the mechanisms by which we do that. It's not the only institution, but it's a critical one. And so my job, first and foremost, when I got here was, let me spend the time to learn the culture. And I noticed a few people in the audience that took the time to actually take me to their communities and express like the history. And so, I saw Tam was here. He took the time, took a day out of his life to actually take me to Westminster and talk to me about the development of that community, what it meant and why. And so that to me is the first step. And then you begin to say, oh, what are the needs? What do you value? And then you begin to bring the infrastructure around how do we create organizations that deliver.
You probably see a lot of small world stories because there's so many similarities wherever you are in the world. Are there any that really jump out at you? Maybe educational experiences or experiences that were, you almost forgot where you were because the people were so similar all around the world?
I would say, one of maybe the most iconic experiences I ever had, I was teaching a class, I ended up teaching in Poland several times, and one of the times I was there, we were talking about employee retention, ironically, given the Great Resignation, and this is a very big story for many people, and they were having problems. They were moving to a free market economy, and people were leaving to go get other jobs. And we had a very interesting conversation about these are the things you need to do to retain and engage your workforce, and they were very just engaged in this conversation. And after a while, one of the executives raised his hand and says, "Wow, that's so fascinating." And as a professor, that's a great compliment. But in my mind, I'm thinking that wasn't really insightful. And he says, you have to understand, previously under the communist regime, when someone didn't come to work, we put them in jail. And I was like, "Did that work?" He was like, "Yeah, we had no turnover."
No turnover.
And I was like,
Don't get any ideas, Stephen.
No.
And
Work from home.
And so I just sat there and I was like, that's certainly not my experience. I would have never thought that I could connect, but it showed me this desire to have a community of individuals that are committed to achieving a goal. That's common, right? What's not common is the tools we have at our disposal. And then you begin to understand, like, you can get down to the core element. So here, what I love about Orange County is the innovation, right? What attracted me to, there were two things that really attracted me to this community. Well, three, if I was to be honest. One, I have family that live here, and I wanted to be close to them. Two, it was the innovation of the companies. There are companies in multiple industries doing amazing things. And three, I actually looked at the data, and I looked at the demography of the county, and I thought, this is a place that it should be a lightning rod for innovation because you have a composition of people that represent perspectives that are truly global. And if you kind of put that together with the resources of the community, you should be able to do something amazing. And what a phenomenal place for a business school to play. That was my goal. And so I came here interviewing and trying to see, was that actually true? Turns out it was true.
Awesome.
So let me stick to something you said and turn it into one of my personal observations as the New Yorker living in California, and probably being now at the first point in my life like the oldest guy in the room. Right. But when I think about geographies that are known for innovation, and so Orange County is a hub for innovation. One of the things I've experienced, maybe it's just generational or something, but I find that there are many who have an idea, many who want to execute an idea, younger, and they've got an exit plan, and that exit is almost more important than the building of the company as being a sustainable company. And maybe it's because so many people have had exits that have resulted in tremendous wealth. So now you've got people who are saying, scratching their heads, what kind of company can I build where I can actually have a big exit? What's your view on innovation, building, and that phenomenon around short-term mindset in terms of wealth build?
I'll start with just an experience I had in New Zealand. So I did a lot of work with the Maori culture there, the Maori community. Maori community is the indigenous population in New Zealand, and many, many very successful companies. And I remember I was asked to do some consulting work with one of the firms, it's the board, and they brought me in and they said, well, in preparation, we want to give you our strategic plan. Read this before you come. And their strategic plan was a 100-year strategic plan. And when we sat down and we had the first conversation, we talked about some ideas about business growth and opportunities. And the first question was, explain to me what this means for my great-grandchildren. And, it was the first time I'd ever been asked a question like that in the business setting. And I probed into that. Like, why would you ask that question? And it went back to, we're trying to develop a business, an organization that will become an institution in our community because our community needs an institution like this. And our expectation is that we will benefit, but more importantly, others will benefit. So then you sort of contrast it with the experiences you were just describing. We have obviously huge economic incentives for individuals to get a company, get the valuation, and exit. And you understand the logic around that. But one thing I will say, and certainly is the University of California, Irvine, what we're about is building Orange County and then building the southern region of California. And for that to happen, you have to have companies that are based here, that believe in the culture here, that want to employ people that are here, that are magnets to, because if you hollow out the community, there's no company that's going to make it. And so I challenge that. It's not to say, listen, you shouldn't be considering the economic benefits of it, but it's also to say, at the end of the day, you're going to do all that for what? You're going to want a place where you can be, that you can be proud of, that you can contribute to in some way. One of the most important ways you can do that is through your company. And so building it in a way that it actually is embedded in the community is quite critical. And I think you noticed something earlier around how the majority of the companies in this region are small to medium-sized enterprises, many of them coming from very diverse backgrounds. And many of them are institutions in that particular community, maybe small community. And they're family held, and they are the mechanism and the institution that holds that family together. So I try to remind my students around, do not separate the broader value of your organization from the economic value. That's a false choice. Yes, you can sell your company. Yes, you can use it for other means. But we should be in the business of developing institutions that provide services that are sustainable.
As the dean of a business school at UCI right here in Orange County, what excites you? Because now you have that opportunity leading this organization at UC Irvine to make that impact that you've seen around the world in these multi-generational legacy companies all over the world. What excites you most about your role that you're doing now at UCI?
So I should answer the question about what excites me just by saying what my passion is.
Awesome.
My story is a different story if I did not have the opportunity to go to university. Like, everything changed because of that experience in ways that I could have never predicted. And so my why I get up every day, everything that I've been focusing on is about increasing access to a world-class education. That's me. That's what I do. That's what I've always wanted to do. And to do that, one, world-class, about providing the best educational experience. It has to be world-class because I was able to travel the world because I got a world-class education. Right? That was the only thing that allowed me to do that, and I want to be able to provide that. And increasing access is about understanding not everybody actually has access to that, right? And so when I walk into a room...
Are you talking about not everybody has fair access? Not everybody knows to have access or wants access?
All of the above.
The system is broken and doesn't enable access?
All of the above. I think, one, there's an awareness of the value that it has. And so some people may have access but don't understand and appreciate why that's valuable. Some people are hungry for it but don't have the resources. Some people wouldn't understand where to go actually to find the right fit. I think that doesn't just happen by chance. And certainly as a university, we're not a passive player in that. We play an active role.
All right, you okay with me going New York on you?
Yeah, please.
Okay. All right.
Only if you let me go.
No. You're going to Chicago. I'll go to New York. This is really actually important because I invited Ian to do this. You and I were sitting in my office. I said, I want to do this fireside chat with you. I think it's incredibly important that the community hear what you're about, what really makes you tick, but also what's going to be different, right? Under you now being the dean of the school. And the reason why I'm saying I'm going to go to New York is this could be an uncomfortable question or a very comfortable question. I sense you being from Chicago, there's no such thing as uncomfortable. All right. So that's why I also sometimes laugh when somebody says, is it okay if I ask you this? I don't want to offend you. And I think that's amusing. All right. So the university has a little reputation, right? So my previous bank, Opus Bank, was located at the intersection of MacArthur and Jamboree, so just down the road. We had the top floor, and I could look out the window of my office, and I could throw a stone, and I could hit UCI. Here, top floor of this building right behind all of you, and I can look out the window, and I could throw that same stone and hit UCI. UCI has always said those words of, we're committed to the community, we're committed to Orange County, and we want to be the university in the county. Now, I know Dean Gilman, or Chancellor Gilman, and I was on the board of UCI, CEO Roundtable, and I remember him saying that we're here, our purpose, our mission is to be a world-class research university. And I said, no, Chancellor, there's a disconnect. I think the role of the university is to educate kids so they can go get a job. That's what the kids want, the students want.
That's what the parents want for certain.
Well, yes, right. So then you're talking about equal access, accessibility, education, and the university is an extraordinarily diverse university. That's incredibly important and spectacular. At one point, historically, when California was in a recession and troubled, it became, we want heavily out-of-state students and we want international students. Why? Tuition's higher, right? But that never switched. And then all of a sudden it became almost impossible for a California student to get into a UC unless it's UC Merced. Okay? So how does this change? What is your view on all of that? And what do you feel is your fight, your role and responsibility as the Dean of the Business School at UCI? Here in this, what did we say, Lisa? Where's Lisa Bartlett? The 6th largest county in the U.S.
So it goes back to what I said, increase access. Now, let's deconstruct that. That's not just a simple thing that happens. So one, we have to increase the number of individuals in the school. So one of the initiatives we've started is the Merage initiative. Let's look at the technology space. The technology sector has been driving all the growth, not all, but a large percentage of the growth that has really benefited this state, and certainly this region. Yet if you look at the numbers, there's not clear access, right? The numbers are quite amazing in terms of the percentage of individuals, say Latinx, Black, who have opportunities in employment, who start the companies, who receive investment, who are on board directors. Why is that important? Well, that's a large percentage of the California population. And how is the state, how is the region going to grow if you don't have access to the things that are actually generating the growth? So why does that happen? Well, we have to go back to the high school years. I'm a big believer that, we can talk about bad or good. There are no bad or good 14-year-olds. They're just kids who are doing what they see. They change what they see, they do something different. And so when I arrived, the first thing we started working on was a Future Leaders Initiative for high school students, where we will bring them to campus, provide them financial and also work with them to build careers in business around technology. Because I'm a big believer if you provide awareness and you give access, then you shape ambition. So why is that important? Because it increases the beginning part of the funnel. We need to have more. There's no way for us to have the quality of life we have here without highly skilled individuals. And if we don't have those individuals, the companies will not stay. They will go to places that have the talent. So we need to be the place that is growing talent. It used to be the place that grew oranges. Now it'll be the place that grows talent.
And then we also need to connect that talent back into the business community.
So
and
then,
create that wave of access so they stay here.
Exactly.
And are driven to be here so we have access to them as future employees.
So then you get them through high school, you provide them with a world-class education at a higher, at a university level. And, I think, the University of California system is not perfect, but I will tell you globally, it is looked at as an exemplar of how a government can actually provide excellence for education. And, you talked about the international out-of-state student. I mean, the university right now is capped. I think it's 18% is what we can maximum have who are non-California citizens, right? And so there's a very strong push to ensure that the UC system is benefiting Californians. And the question becomes then, how do we become more innovative to be able to expand our capacity to do that? And so another initiative we're running, and we started even before COVID, was how do we use online technology to reach individuals that could not necessarily get to Irvine? We were the first business school and one of the first entities in the UC system to actually start providing business education opportunities that were online at a world-class level, with no sacrificing of quality. We have clear data on that, and we want to expand that even more. And that will be the secret to us being able to reach individuals who may not, and change the model, the economic model around it, so people have access. So that's a big initiative we're working on right now. But then, the next step. Business school is not just about learning facts and figures, it's a professional activity. The employers want people that are smart, but they want people they can put in front of clients that actually understand how to engage and problem solve. And so that happens through learning about journalism. So we work with companies like yours and others where we provide, I'm teaching a class this weekend. The entire class is around a company. We have a case on a company, and we will build the entire class around solving a specific problem for the company. And that's the curriculum. And everything culminates with, all of you interviewed for a job at some point, and there's a behavioral question that comes and says, tell me about a time when you had to. That's the question. And the students in my class, what I'm trying to do is, they'll say, well, I can tell you about the time we had to design the HR system for a multinational organization. These are the complexities we had to have. This is how we managed the client. This is what we came up with. This is how I dealt with my team. If they can do that, they're getting a job. At least they're getting a second interview. Right? And so it's about the skill set and how do we take the curriculum and then make it relevant for the employers, give people the behavioral capabilities. And then the last step around this is, it's not enough for me to generate and graduate great students. I have to play a role. We're an influential institution. We need to play a role in shaping, if you like, fertilizing the soil where they get planted. And so it's not satisfactory to me that not enough of them get access to capital. Not enough of them are able to have connections with venture capitalists to get their ideas funded in early stages. Not enough of them are able, later in their careers, to be able to have influential roles around directorships. So as a business school, we want to fundamentally shift the ecosystem around them. And so that's the steps we're doing.
So that's an interesting component. You just said not all of them have access to capital. This is a kid coming out of school. Not all of them have access to VC money. Not every kid is going to come out of school and launch their own business.
This is true.
Right? They may actually work for somebody before they launch their own business. And I know we're dealing with a generation that they're all going to launch their own business, right? But I think that, and I don't know if this is a question or just it's stuff I think about, but I think it's critically important. You and I have talked about this, that we all collaboratively connect and work together. And I've noticed that you really have that in you, and a strong commitment and desire to finally really partner with the business community here in Orange County. And I think that's critically important.
So I want to fundamentally change the talent pipeline of Orange County. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, maybe. But that's what we do. That's our job. And I have one metric actually that I use for my performance evaluation. I'm sure Chancellor Gilman has more, but I have one. How many people did we graduate this year? That's the number. If that number is increasing every year, we're probably doing okay. And to do that well, I need partners, right? So to fundamentally shift the talent pipeline, you have to. I know we as a collection, as a university, do certain things well. We need to partner with the not-for-profit organizations that understand the needs of the community. We need to partner with government who can help us scale some of the phenomenal initiatives. We need to partner with business who can not just fund what we're trying to do, but also benefit from the talent we're generating. I think a university at its best is, if you like, the sacred ground that all members of the community come to talk openly and honestly about the challenges they're seeing. And, I look at what we see right now in the world, not just here in the U.S., but globally. We need those sacred spaces to have those conversations because there's complex issues. And I actually think as a public institution, the way I frame my work is that the state of California has invested in the University of California system. And then in times of turmoil, challenge, and stress, they come and they want to make a withdrawal. They need to get some expertise to guide. How do you make sense of a post-pandemic from the trauma that we've experienced? How do you make sense of the various complexities that is? This is where university has to be the space that not just is open, but is calling for people to say we want to work with you to come up with innovations around that. And so, opportunities like this are phenomenal. The opportunities we can do with various different chambers. This is an open call to individuals in the audience. We're your business school. We want to generate your employees. We want to train your kids. We know how to do certain things well, but we want to work with you to do that so that we do it excellent. And that's the goal.
Well, I've been telling businesses constantly in all the meetings that I'm involved in. It seems like everybody is saying that their biggest challenge today is finding talent, right? And we saw what the unemployment numbers look like, and it seems like we're almost at 100% employment. And finding that wave of talent, I've been saying it exists. It's in our business schools. It's in our universities, but we're not tapping into it. And that's what you're saying. You want to be the feeder system. if we're right here at home, the talent is there. I think we're all beholden to work together to have that connectivity.
I'll just go back to the class I'm teaching. So I went to a company and I said, I want to teach my students something that is meaningful, and I want to do it in a way that's meaningful for you, right? So I don't want it to be abstract. Now, for this company, they're a commercial enterprise. They have to trust us that when we have our students do this work, it is meaningful work. Because that's a cost. They're going to have staff working with us, and they're going to show us information. They have to trust us that we're going to deliver. By the same token, we have to trust them that they're going to actually work with us around things that are very meaningful. And that doesn't just happen. It shows up over and over and over again is the way you actually develop that. But this is the role of the University of California, Irvine, not just in business. It's also in the way in which we think about our engineering activity, the way in which we think about humanities activity. We will do that best when we're taking guidance and input and have channels with the community around that. And that's a very conscious, deliberate effort. And we raise funds as a university. That's not unknown. But I've always said that when you're raising funds, if you're raising funds around issues or problems that are meaningful to the community, it's never going to be an issue because people see value in it. They see that as an investment. And how do you do that? You understand what the needs are. So I've been fortunate to do that with communities in Australia, communities in Indonesia, communities in New Zealand, and now I have this great opportunity to do the same thing here in a different way.
So anytime Stephen's in a conversation, and I hear him all the time talking about impact, and that's really the whole focus of Genesis Bank is how can we impact. Obviously, that's important to you as well. In history, and importance today, and make it obvious how you can impact where you go. Why UCI? What specific? I'm guessing you had options. Why UCI? Why here? Why now?
And that goes the other way too. Why UCI picking you? Yeah. You were not the local dude.
That's true.
That's
true. Yeah.
I was not. They had to work hard to find my phone number in New Zealand. They found it.
Eights,
right? They have
Yeah.
resources, I guess. They found it.
Yeah.
Why? So when I came to interview, I knew it was a great school. I'll be honest. I was concerned that it was a place that was comfortable.
What does that mean?
What was it? Yeah.
This is a world-class institution by any metric you would ever want to use. And it's impressive because it's a relatively young institution relative to its peers. And you could easily say, Ian, we want to bring you here as a dean and just keep the engine running. Don't mess up. And I didn't need that. That wasn't going to be inspirational for me. And I also kind of looked and said, as great as things are, you can't tell me, given the statistics that we have, that our work is done. And so the question that I asked over and over again was, what is the goal? What are you trying to do? And the answer I received was, we're not as engaged as we need to be. There are big opportunities. We want to be the institution that drives social mobility. We believe there's tremendous opportunities. I mean, I was really impressed. 50% of our graduates last year were first and family graduates. And we have students doing phenomenal things that, to be quite frank, many other universities would not take a chance on. And they're doing phenomenal outcomes. And so that was inspirational to me. That was what made me go, this is something that aligns with my goal, increased access to a world-class education. And then I looked around and I thought, not only is that the goal here, or the value, but we have a community that's robust. There's opportunities. And so I've done this work in spaces that didn't have as many opportunities. And so to have actual businesses that are thriving and will be the cutting edge organizations for the next versions of technology that shape our lives, and being able to get students into that was the thing.
So when you're all finished here, what will success look like for you?
Oh man, all finished. Well, listen.
It's never finished.
The numbers don't lie, right? So have we seen a diversification of our student body? Have we increased the numbers of students that graduate? Do I see examples, not handfuls of examples, multitudes of examples of individuals that have either been able to get positions in these technology-driven companies or create these technology-driven companies, and they can link back to our business school? This Future Leaders Initiative that we're developing, my vision for that is in 10 years, that program will have an alumni of thousands of students who went through this, who will now view this as a community that they will be linking to. We don't need to be the enabler always. We just need to get the engine started, and then that community gets the confidence and understanding and the resources to be able to drive that forward. So if I have that happening, I will go, we did good work. And, if that's all I ever accomplish after that, that's a pretty good ending, but I would hope I have a little bit more left.
So other than 100-degree April days and palm trees, what has surprised you the most about bringing your family here?
Well, I mean, everyone says, this is the generosity that people have. So I'm tremendous. I think I truly underestimated the innovativeness. We talk to people here tomorrow. What we're going to do tomorrow? Like it's not yesterday, and I've lived and I've worked in places that's all about yesterday. And yesterday is great. It's yesterday, so let's think about tomorrow. That's been really cool. I underestimated the diversity and the richness of that. And being a kid from Chicago, I kind of underestimated actually the beach is really beautiful. I didn't really, we had beaches in New Zealand, but they were cold. And now you go and you're like, wow, this is okay. I get it.
And Lake Michigan actually gets icebergs.
I don't know where that sand comes from.
I don't think it's natural.
I wouldn't trust it.
You can skate on a lake.
So I want to dig into this whole diversity, and we have a very diverse community. Orange County, LA County, Riverside, San Bernardino County, 60 to 75% majority minority population. We thought it was incredibly important that we be reflective of our community. We've seen too many times, especially during COVID and during the PPP, that minority businesses were left way behind, and that we as a financial institution, we've got to lead by example, and decided that we're going to be not only a pillar of strength of the U.S. economy as a bank, but we're going to be a minority depository institution, and we got that designation. And then we actually got designated as one of only 2 diverse multiracial minority depository institutions. And I thought that, we really thought as a team that it was incredibly important that we have a strategy around DEI. And we put together what was initially an ad hoc DEI committee. And then one of the first things we did in that committee after meeting with all the DEI leaders around Orange County was we made the decision to make that committee permanent, no longer ad hoc, and we thought that was an incredible message to ourselves, of how seriously we take it. Then, and let me just share this journey, and then I'm going to work my way to my question. But we decided we're not just going to roll out a strategy, inform the community what our strategy is, and maybe have a disconnect, and be viewed as that arrogant group of people that decided that this is what they're going to do in the community, and the community feels like, what does that have to do with what we think it should be in the community? So we listened to all our constituent partners. We started with everybody in the team, everybody in the company, and we listened to what they thought our view, our role, our purpose, our mission should be internally and externally around DEI. And we took down all that data and collected it. Then we met with all of our community partners. So the Asian Business Association, the Orange County Hispanic Chamber, the Black Chamber of Orange County, the TGR Foundation, Tiger Woods Foundation, and we collected even more data, what they felt our role and our purpose should be around DEI. And then we met with all of our municipal leader partners, our mayors, our city managers, our heads of economic development, and many of these organizations also have a head of DEI, including within the utilities and agencies that exist here in Southern California. And everything ranged from they know how to spell DEI all the way to they now have strategies developed. And they gave us a tremendous amount of input. We collected all that. And it boiled down into really 5 pillars. So build a strong financial institution that as an MDI can sustainably promote both social good and economic good. Enable career growth and intellectual growth within Genesis Bank. Embrace DEI into experiential modes of communication. Be a central hub of influence and connectivity. And develop solutions that enable small and minority-owned businesses to break down impediments that inhibit access to economic growth opportunities. And then underneath each of those pillars, we have meaningful ways that we're going to actually activate in each of those pillars. And that's going to be built into our strategic plan. But our strategic plan is really the community's strategic plan for us. So DEI at UCI, you're allowed to coin that, by the way.
There you go.
Right? So what does it mean to you, based on life experiences, business experiences, knowing the complexion and demographic of the university, the diversity of the university, the generational gaps that you have even within the university between faculty, board, students, grad students, undergraduate students, and your important role and responsibility as being the major UC here in Orange County?
So we have a phrase, well, one, I should commend you on the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Right? Because not every organization is willing to put in the work to actually think very strategically around this. We have a phrase called inclusive excellence, and I think that's the goal here. So our business school is one that is built around being at the intersection between business, technology, and entrepreneurship. That is our goal. How do we take ideas, commercialize them, and if necessary, create entities, new organizations that allow these ideas to be accessible? So to do that, we have a logic of, well, to do that effectively, we have to do it in an inclusive manner. So it's always going to go back to excellence. It's always going to go back to excellence. I think what we're trying to always do is say, if you're here, there's an opportunity for you to be excellent. What do we have to do in this environment to get that out of you? And sometimes that's, have we presented enough options for you? So I'll give you a good example. Right now, we're doing a survey of all of our classes in the business school. And the question I asked simply of my faculty was, look at your curriculum. What are the examples that you've used of excellence in your class? Who was the case study on? Who was the speaker? Where was the case study set? What were the examples? And then I want you to look at the composition of our community and just compare the statistics, right? Because if you just taught an entire class on finance and it's all about excellence in finance and there was no example of an individual from pick a community in that, you can see the disconnect, right? Because my thought on this is that being excellent is tough. Like everybody's going to have to take a sacrifice to become excellent. Nobody needs to take more of a sacrifice than anybody else, right? So I don't need to learn hard finance and also try to envision what I would look like doing it. Take the first step away. Give me an example to show that this is something that some of my background, my gender, my ethnicity, my religion, because there's examples of excellence in all these communities that we oftentimes do not highlight. And then I can get down to the hard work of being excellent. And I think when you're designing an organization, if you use that as the lens, right, again, always asking that question around, wait, why are we using only these examples? What other examples do we have? Why are we not considering only these markets? Clearly there's economic activity going on over there. Why are we not considering what their needs are? It begins to frame and shape your strategy around identifying spaces and opportunities where you can contribute. It's no different than me saying, look at the economic growth in Indonesia. Wow, if they're growing like that, probably is the case they don't have enough business leaders to lead all those companies. And we would think about that as an international strategy. Well, I could do the same thing with Santa Ana. I can do the same thing in Tustin, right? And so it's the same scale. It's not a departure from my business, but it's making sure I always have that lens of inclusive excellence in everything that we're doing about how we shape our curriculum, who our partners are, what our outcomes of choice can be.
I think the university is in very good hands.
No doubt about it.
Okay, so I think this has been wonderful. I'd like to open it up for any questions. Does anybody have any questions at all?
I'm curious how you feel your students at the business school and the entrepreneurs that are coming out of there represent the Santa Ana culture, the Anaheim culture. The way I see it, much of the focus of entrepreneurship locally, regionally, is much around high growth, high tech types of businesses. But there's a huge community of service providers, your childcare providers, your homemaker, the folks that clean homes. These are largely the parents of those students that you're looking to serve. And the reason why it's so hard for a lot of those students to land into your classrooms is because of the economic systemic challenges that they face in their neighborhoods that would be aided by an improvement or enhancement in their parents' economic status. And so obviously this problem isn't on you, but I'm just curious your take on how you've helped to translate that dynamic in these other countries that you've worked worked in to address those issues. And I'm coming from a place where, we do work in Orange County, focusing on those micro businesses that are hustling, right, just to make it. Not to make it to UCI, just to make it to the next day. And what's the role of UCI and being this world-class institution that's in our backyard with those types of entrepreneurs and the parents of those folks that you're trying to attract?
So I mentioned the Future Leaders Initiative for our high school students. And one of the things that we realized was, and it's not, this is not an overly insightful point, but the culture matters, right? And so we have this concept of collectivist communities where the family connections are very strong, not just within the mother, the father, the children, the aunt, the uncle, the grandparents, right? And you can think about these collective communities where the decisions are made collectively by all the elders in that community about the child, because the child is the most important thing. And that varies a lot across different cultures. So when we were going down this path, we really thought about that. And we said, well, one, we want to engage the parents, the elders, the guardians, whatever their role might be in that child's life, in this educational process, because if it's reinforced by the parents, the guardians, it'll be reinforced into the child. They may or may not listen to what their teacher says, but when they go home and their grandmother says something, they're listening, right? So we have to let the grandmother know, right? We have to let the aunt know. And so as we thought more about that, we also appreciated that we're talking about changing the well-being of this child's career, but we can also change the parents' outcome. So this is a small thing, but I think it's important. So we have a partnership with Google as part of that program. They're going to provide us licenses for the students to go and do online training to get certificates around certain skill sets that are employee-ready skill sets. We've asked that they give us license not just for the kids, but also for any of the kids that participate, their parents as well. Right? Because while I can think about education changing that kid's life, you want to really change a kid's life? Allow their parents to get a job that pays them more. That'll change their life. And so, the best thing you could ever have is the parents or the grandparents or the aunts studying at the same time that the kids are studying. Like, if you get that going on in a family, it's amazing. And so these are the ways we want to design these types of initiatives so that we're actually taking in, and I take a look at that and I'm saying that makes sense if you start with the lens of it's about culture, and a collectivist culture, of course you have to include the parents. That's different in different parts of the world. In other cases, the kids make the decision. Maybe they don't listen to the parents, but they're making a decision, and that's fine. That's just a different cultural lens. We should be okay and open to all those various different iterations. Other questions?
One coming up over here on the left.
Good afternoon. My name is Nabila Wolse, and I'm actually a grad student at Cal State Fullerton. It's wonderful to sit here and see your presentation, Dean Williamson. So my question was, I love the idea of your Future Leaders Initiative and exposing students of color, someone like myself who went to school at Troy High School in Fullerton, to new sectors. I think that's a wonderful idea. What I wanted to know is there a plan to provide support for students? So for instance, I want to see more minority women in tech, but I don't find that they always get the support that they need in order to progress in those jobs. So for instance, if they feel uncomfortable or if they feel unwelcome in the workplace that they're trying to get into.
So we launched a program last year called the Bridge program in the business school. And again, one of the things that attracted me to the university was this strong notion of social mobility, first and family graduates. And we do that in a way that is truly, I think, it is globally world-class. But we noticed that, that's a big transition. If you haven't had anybody that's ever gone to college, and you're the first family to do that, and particularly if you're in a domain where, there haven't been a lot of people, your gender, your ethnicity, whatever, that are doing that particular background, that's daunting. Again, everybody's got to sacrifice to be excellent. I don't need anybody sacrificing more than someone else, right? That's just asking too much of a person. So this Bridge program is a program we created for incoming freshman students where we work with them to not just teach them business, but socialize them around the university environment. And we piloted it this year. We took data to kind of see what that looked like. The students had phenomenal outcomes associated with that. So now we look to expand that even more. And this becomes the way in which we're able to provide that socialization that you're describing that allows people to feel comfortable in those environments. And I should say, I did research specifically on women in IT, and why do we see such a huge dropout of women in that space? It doesn't make any sense. The reality is they get better grades than the men, consistently, always. And yet, when they get into these professions, they some reason they tend to leave. And what we found was it was typically they didn't have the social networks or the social emotional support to navigate the challenges that we all face at different phases of our career. They didn't have someone to call to say, hey, am I crazy? Or it's like, how do I handle this? And if you create that space, if you provide those examples, if you make that easier for them, it tends to be the case they stick with it and they actually be more successful. So we think this bridge program is a good way to start that early on in our educational experience, and then hopefully that gravitates. We see from the data that the most vulnerable time for one of our students is year one, and then if they make it through year one, if there is a gap in performance, it typically disappears by the time they get to year 3 or 4. But a lot of them don't make it to year 2, and that's the issue. Please.
I really appreciated your presentation today, and I really love your vision about expanding access to people being able to continue their education at Irvine. You were talking about your initiatives with the Santa Ana Mayor and allowing parents to be able to perpetuate kind of like a learning environment for their own kids as well. And I think that's a really great thing to do because that's setting up for the future. But coming from your background, if there were another kid like yourself who grew up in maybe a not so nice part of Chicago that also had really big dreams and they excelled in school, but their parents didn't have the job or the ability to pay for that. I know I might be asking you to reinvent the wheel. I promise I'm not though. But in your position, is there anything that you would do to expand access for people that are in those situations?
So it's two sides to that, right? I mean, there's things that, so if I say the 18-year-old, 17-year-old Ian, there's things that the 18-year-old Ian could do that would provide more opportunity. But by the same token, like the 17, 18-year-old Ian is like, I mean, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what's going on, right? I mean, like, you know, like he's still a dependent, right? And so there's things that the community around him needs to be doing. So I answer that question in 2 ways. Let's start with the community around him. So, you know, I'm not 18-year-old Ian. I'm fill in the blank over Ian. And I know what I know. I know that experience. So, and I have opportunity and resources. So do I have the strategy, the judgment to understand the responsibility to actually create programs like that for the 18-year-old Ian? Right? Because that kid's not going to be able to come up with that program. They can't come into my business school and say, you know what we need to do? We need to get our faculty to go down Santa Ana. Like, that's not happening. And if they show up doing that, we're probably escorting them away. Right? So I have a comment around the institution, the businesses, the leaders, the individuals who've gone through that process, who have had, you know, I've been fortunate. I have the ability to provide for my family. So I have, you know, but do I have responsibility? Right? So that's the question there around create the environment where you teach and you talk to the individuals around, listen, your organization will be successful. Who's going to lead this thing? Who's going to make it grow? It's going to be this kid. How do you get them from there to when they're like your best performer? You have a responsibility around that. And that's what we're trying to illustrate. I think what we're doing in the business school, the initiative I'm describing, we're not going to do that at scale. We're not going to be able to solve the problem for thousands and thousands of kids, but we can illustrate it so other organizations, like the Genesis Banks, like the others that are now, will say, hey, we should get involved in that, and that allows us to go further with that. So we can provide that illustration. Then there's what do you tell the kid? And, you know, for me, you know, I was nervous. I didn't want to be in an uncomfortable place. It's bet on yourself, right? To put yourself in those situations where you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable because that is where the growth is going to come from. And I was terrified. You know, when I went to Miami University of Ohio, it was 6 hours away from home. In my mind, it was all the right things. It was a good business school. It was away from home. It was on the road. It was important. I got to my first class, the very first day of school at 8 a.m. I got there at 7:30. I was the only kid in the room because I had no plan B. This got to work. And I just felt like if I get there early, I'll just learn more osmosisly. I'll soak it in. And it was the first class I'd ever been in my life where I was the only black kid in the room. And within 15 minutes of that class filling up, I don't remember anything what was going on. I just remember feeling like I am comfortable. Like I can't concentrate. Like, and I had to work with, do I want to, like I needed to stretch myself, right? And so there are gonna be moments in time where you have to be okay being uncomfortable to learn. Because if you think you have an idea, you probably do. So you gotta stretch. And that would have been the lesson. If I had told myself that earlier, I probably would have been even a little more ambitious. I probably would have got a passport earlier. You know, like I might have done a little bit more interesting things. So I think there's two sides to that, right? So we can't put all of it on the child. Some of it's on the adults, particularly the ones that have resources. They have to understand resources come with responsibility. And then on the child, there's a story around, you know, don't sell yourself short. Bet on yourself. It's okay. In fact, bet on yourself early. Consequences aren't so high. Much higher later.
Sell yourself tall.
I wanted to go back to the idea of education being something that everybody deserves, but then also bringing that idea along with education as a means for getting a job. So I was just wondering, how do you navigate in between education for just the sake of intellectualism and education just for like the job market? You know what I mean? Like, if everyone deserves an education, what should that education be used for, and how should the university play a role in that?
And Ian, as you get ready to answer that, I feel like that one statement that I made keeps coming back to haunt me. There are incredible needs for people to be educated, to be incredibly bright, to be forensic, and have an intellectual curiosity about the world and experiences, etc. But we all do need to pay bills, right? And have that financial fiscal responsibility that goes with life also. So that's why I was saying, what I said to Chancellor Gilman, research is incredibly important, but it can't just all be about the research. We got to educate kids to be able to actually go and do something with their lives, and that might require a job.
Almost always requires a job. Listen, my son is sitting there. It always requires a job.
And by the way,
100% clear, right, Sterling?
I'm going to ask your permission to speak with your son for a moment.
Yeah, please.
All right. As though you're not. Do I have your permission, Mom? Okay. All right. So one of the greatest moments in my life is the moment that I could say, my daughters both have jobs. They're both powerfully succeeding. One's 26 and one's 29. And one is absolutely off the payroll. And one is increasingly going off the payroll. And they have tremendous pride in running their lives as powerful young women in this world. So yes, a job can be incredibly, not just important financially, but I remember the moment I got my first job when I was 21 years old, and people who work with me, they've heard the story. I negotiated really hard when I was offered that first job at $16,000 a year to ask and beg and scratch and claw and get up to $18,000 a year, and I thought I accomplished something, right? But I immediately called my parents and I said, I don't need any help anymore, thank you.
Yeah, listen, I think the way I don't think that's a false choice. The world doesn't have to be that bifurcated. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be that way. I think, and it's hard, what we do when we take on an educational experience of any sort, it doesn't always have to be at a university. What we're really trying to do is solve a problem, right? So the question is not, can I get a job or not? The question is, what problem are you going to try to solve? Now, there are a bunch of problems. Some are more or less important, right? That's the way to think about it. And not like every problem we have in society, there's a reason for us to solve it, but some are more or less important in that situation. Some are more or less important to you. Some of them you're better skilled at. So some of them are more important to a particular community. And I've always kind of felt like if you get the educational capability to understand the problem, to dissect it, to understand how to engage with it, whatever that is, whether it's how do I write a more engaging novel, How do I do code? How do I produce a medical device? How do I find a way to manage the finances of an organization? These are all problems that are very meaningful for us as a community, and there are different educational pathways that you go around it. If you center yourself around that, then the job kind of becomes secondary, right? I mean, one of the things that I've appreciated in my career is I started off trying to get a job, and now when I interview for roles, it's saying, what types of problems are you trying to solve here? That was like my interview here was, what's the problem you want me to solve? Is it a problem I'm interested in? Is it a problem I'm good at? Is it a problem that's important? And that I think was I can't say I started there, right? It was sort of like somebody employed me. But then over time I began to realize, like, well, the thing that actually generates the most fulfillment for me and also the biggest return is if I frame it around that. The other thing I would say around that, just in closing, is I begin to also appreciate, I started off getting a degree in management, right? And my job was to be in management. And then later on in my career, I began to understand management is not a problem. There's a business that has a problem. Management is a part of that. And so I can't really be a business professor if I don't understand and be willing to go out and get skill sets in other things. So when people talk about lifelong learning, it's really about understanding that the problem you're trying to deal with, if it's complex enough, is going to require you to retool on the fly sometimes. So it means I work with people from different domains. And I'm okay with saying, I know my bit, but I don't know your bit. Teach me. And that's, why would I be motivated to expose myself? Because I'm trying to solve a problem. I'm not trying to get a degree. And so that's the way in which I've evolved around that.
Have you enjoyed every step of your career?
I feel really blessed. I feel like I'm doing what I was made to do. Like, I think, and I know that everybody doesn't get that opportunity. There are people who are certainly as skilled or more skilled than me and who could be doing this, but for whatever reason, they didn't get the opportunity. I just feel very fortunate. I had people along the way who were able to do that. And, everybody will say, yeah, you had to work hard. And everybody works hard. That's not, everybody's working hard if you're trying to do something important or be good at it. But not everybody gets that opportunity, and that's why I have a lot of passion around that increase in access. Because it may or may not be that the students we work with decide they want to be an investment banker. That's fine. They may decide I definitely don't want to do that. But the process of doing this will expose it to them. So I just feel very fortunate that I didn't have to fight that.
So the reason why I asked that is because, and this is a lesson for your son also, that if you've enjoyed every step of your career, every role that you had during your career, did it ever really feel like a job?
I mean, no, in the sense that I knew I was doing the right thing when I was going to bed dreaming about it, right? So, like, nobody's paying me, like, I'm giving free labor in my dreams, and I'm okay with that. So I think, again, this goes back to your question. Pick the right problem.
Yeah.
Right? Pick the one that you think, I could get behind focusing on that for a while. I was able to do that. And that's, now, let's be clear. Not every aspect of what you do is always enjoyable. And there are definitely days when you're more or less tired. And occasionally people get in the way, That's just how it works. But if you had the right motivation, it'd be okay.
Ian, amazing.
My pleasure.
As I said before, we're in incredible hands. And any way that we can help, you and I think we have a great partnership. I am now, whether you like it or not, going to deeply immerse you into our municipal roundtable, and make sure that all our municipal leaders know you and hear from you, and all of our chamber partners in the community. I think they need to know you intimately as well. I want to give to you, I need my glasses back on, showing my age.
It's all right. Badge of honor.
Right. So Dean Ian O. Williamson, UCI Merage School of Business, is now a member of our Business Leadership Circle, the Genesis Bank Institute for Entrepreneurship. Ian, thank you.
Thank you very
My
much.
honor.
Thank you. So let me just say thank you very much. I appreciate everybody bearing the heat. I followed a tough crowd. The last speaker brought great food. I just bought hot air.
No, great brain and a lot of passion.
And let me just say, as I said before, we're this community's business school. That is our aspiration. And please hold me to that. And if there are ways in which we can work with you to enhance the talent that we have here, that is our goal, and we really look forward to engaging with you around that. Thanks again to Genesis Bank. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.
And everyone stay cool.